Good morning. It's good to see everybody this morning, and I do want to just give that quick another quick push for Thrive next week. We're really looking forward to that. We got a lot of kids coming in. Our kids are going to be there as well, and if you volunteered, I want to thank you in advance. It's going to be a really, really fun weekend. If you have some time on Saturday, you want to pop in just to see what's going on, we certainly welcome that. But I appreciate Caleb so much for his vision and for his organizational skills and many other talents that he has to pull off something like this. And it's going to be really nice. And so thank you for your support and your prayers for something like that. With that, let's go ahead and we'll jump in. We've all had it happen. It could be rain or snow or fog, maybe a mist or just a really, really dark night. I'll share with you 2 or 3 times this happened to me. It's a point where you just can't see where you're going. Now that's okay sometimes, but there are other times when it's really, really bad. I remember a couple times when I was younger in college or around that age, I was once driving from Birmingham over to Oxford to see Lana, and I'm going across I-20 and snow out of nowhere, right? I don't know, it must have been one of those snows that we can count on one hand living around here. But it started coming down. Sorry, the roads were decent. It wasn't really collecting. It wasn't, the temperature in the road and the heat and all that good stuff. But it was coming down. It was blinding. And I remember I'm driving my 1993 Chevy S10. That was the second car I actually had. First car I had rolled down the driveway one day into the neighbor's house. That's what I meant to say. I'll tell you about that next time. Anyway, the S10, it was really cool. It's a great truck. I would take that truck back today in a heartbeat. The only reason I got rid of it is because we wouldn't all forfeit. I love that truck so much. My license plate said my S10. I know. When you were 16, that is awesome. So I'm driving this S10, 5-speed, and I'm like leaned up on the steering wheel because I can't see anything. The snow's coming down so hard. And, at your early 20s, at this age, I probably would have just exited, let it pass, or maybe, no, we got to go. And so I just forged ahead as hard as I could in that blinding snow. And I wasn't, old enough or smart enough to be scared or understand really that I probably shouldn't be driving in that. I'll tell you another one. I was going down to Miami for a mission trip, and I had to meet the team later. And so this was also just out of college. We're flying in, and a lot of respect for, a lot of pilots, airline employees here. As we're landing in South Florida, as it happens sometimes, this thunderstorm just pops up right over the airport. Now, there are options, right? You could circle, you could wait, you could divert. This guy decides he wants to land in that thunderstorm. And so as we're coming in, this was one where, here's how I gauge it when I fly. I look around, check the flight attendants. How are they feeling? If they're still serving drinks and they're walking around, I might be nervous, but if they're okay, I'm probably okay. You look around for the frequent flyers. You can tell these people, they act differently on airplanes than people who maybe fly just every so often. And you look at the frequent flyers. This is one where I'm looking at frequent flyers, and they're pulling up their life insurance policies and checking beneficiaries. And so this thunderstorm is so thick, I'm sitting on the wing. I look out my window. I can't see the wingtip. I can't see the ground until we hit it. Like, it was so thick. And everything I had, my entire life, was in the hands of that pilot. And I understand there's instruments and there's protocols and there's all these different things. But at that point, could not see where I was going. I'll give you one more example, and this is a lot more recent. This was this past spring. Pop and I are headed up to Nashville. We're going to watch Auburn and Vanderbilt play basketball. So as we're going through Chattanooga, going through Chattanooga is terrible. It doesn't matter, and it's been for every time I remember going through Chattanooga, there's always really heavy road construction. They're always doing something. Now, that's a lot coming from people who live in metro Atlanta. Of course, there's always road construction, but we got more roads. Like, you're likely to miss some of it. Up there, they got the one, and it goes through town, and they are always constantly working on it. I've never gone through Chattanooga, no matter if you're coming from Alabama or Tennessee and coming south or through Georgia, you're going to hit that construction. So sure enough, as we go through, here's the construction. We go from 4 lanes down to 2. On my left are the temporary concrete barriers. You've seen those, and they like to put those right on the line. And so, literally you could just reach out and touch the thing. On my right is every 18-wheel truck in the state of Tennessee for some reason that day. Every single one of them. And at this moment, as we're going through and we're down to about, the speed's reduced and all these things, there's traffic everywhere, still moving at a pretty good pace though. So it wasn't like stop and go. And then the bottom just falls out. And it's more rain than I've seen in my lifetime. I look over and there's rivers forming in the median and there's animals running for high ground. And it's just so much rain. And you got to slow down a little bit. I'm probably doing 40, 45 at this point, just trying. And again, I'm leaned up on the steering wheel. Tanker truck over here, wall over here. Here we go. We're driving through Chattanooga. We're just trying to get out of town. All of a sudden, that truck, I think all 18 tires at once hit this puddle. Probably there's an inch of water anyway because of the drainage, because of the construction. But gallons, I would say thousands of gallons of water splash up onto the windshield, okay? Wipers are flying. And so I'm going to tell you it's probably 3 or 4 seconds. I can't see anything. The wipers can't even keep up with the amount of water on our windshield. I looked this up. At 45 miles an hour, for 3 seconds, you go 198 feet. That is 66 yards. It's football season. That makes more sense, doesn't it? Can you imagine going 60 yards at speed? No clue where that car was going. I'm just driving. And I kind of peek out the side and I see the wall, so I'm not getting any closer. I peek out that window and I kind of see a tire. I'm not getting any closer to that. And so for those few seconds, I was completely and totally blind. All I had was the faith that the road was still there. Could not see a thing. A few minutes later, it was a little while later, when it all stopped, we got up on that area around Mont Eagle and we pulled off. Best thing about my dad, never said a word. Never flinched. Nothing. And I'll show you pictures if you want to see them of him multiple times riding the rock and roller coaster down at Disney World. He doesn't even react. This is what he does. That thing shoots you out of there from 0 to 70 in like a second and a half. And then he got off and he said, well, I did kind of have to adjust my glasses. And so he's sitting in that rain, that torrential downpour, and I don't know that the tires were even touching the pavement. We're floating through Chattanooga at this point. Nothing. He's just like, oh, this is great. And so we got off and I told him, I said, I couldn't see for a while there. He said, yeah, I could tell. And that's it. And so we were fine. So the point there is we have been, you could tell 1,000 stories, I'm sure, of a time when you just couldn't see the road in front of you. And you have to keep moving. You have to keep going forward. And you just have to believe and you have to have faith and you have to trust that the road is going to be there. And that's what we're talking about this morning. And the title is When You Can't See the Road. And what we're going to do is walk through just a couple of verses. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 and 6. We're going to focus on those 2 verses. It breaks down really nicely into 4 phrases. We're going to take those 4 phrases, make a few points from that, some application. And to do that, we're going to take a look at the life of Abraham as we go through this proverb. So Proverbs chapter 3, and we're going to begin in verse 5. Now, again, we go through seasons, we go through times of life where it's dark. We're walking through a valley. We're at the bottom of the pit. I love that analogy, thinking back to the life of Joseph. And there are times where we just can't see the road. Proverbs chapter 3 and verse 5, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding. The idea here is to trust God fully. It's not partial. It is not conditional. It is a full 100% trusting in God. And there's a difference there, and you can kind of take these words and build it out with belief and faith and trust and how they all work together and how they all kind of build on each other. It's one thing to believe. It's not just merely I believe something could happen, did happen. I believe something about someone. You build on that and you develop faith. And we remember the Hebrew writer tells us about faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. And so faith is when we build on that belief, right? I don't just believe, but I have things to base that belief on, and I've got history to base it on, and so I can put faith in something or someone because I know them and because I understand them and I have a relationship with them. And you think about that with our faith in God. And you think about trust. Trust, on the other hand, is an active expression of that faith. It's relying on someone with confidence, but especially during a time of uncertainty and a time of difficulty. Faith will accept the truth of who God is, but trust is placing confidence in God, placing confidence in his character, and placing confidence in his promise. God's never broken a promise. You can trust because you can look at the history. You can know the future, and you can know that God will not break a promise. Belief and faith and trust work together. You've probably heard the analogy before. You got a tightrope walker, right? And the tightrope walker has a trick where he walks across the tightrope with a wheelbarrow. And you say, well, I believe he could probably do that. And then you see him. You're like, oh, that's faith. Now I know. I've seen him do it 100 times. I have faith that he can walk out there on a tightrope with a wheelbarrow all the way across the tightrope. Trust? Get in the wheelbarrow, right? Do you trust that he can do it? You're putting your full confidence in him to make it across. It's wholehearted. I think about a child. When a child reaches up and holds the hand of their parent, that child will go with that parent anywhere they go. They know they're going to be safe. They're going to be secure. They're going to be protected. They're going to be led by that parent. They're not going to go anywhere that the parent is not also willing to go with them. That child implicitly and wholeheartedly trusts that parent when they're holding their hand. And so when you have that belief and that faith and that trust and you combine all that, it creates movement, right? It creates movement. You can't just be static when we're talking about these things, especially when God calls us out to move. You look in Genesis chapter 12, beginning in verse 1. Now the Lord said to Abram, go from your country and you and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you, and I'll make of you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. In verse 4 it says, so Abram went. So Abram went. That is belief in God, that is faith in God, and the trust in God is what moved him. It has movement. When we look in Hebrews chapter 11, and we're going through that hall of fame of faith, the Hebrew writer would tell us in verse 8, by faith Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he was to receive an inheritance. And he went, not knowing where he was going. By faith he went to live in a land of promise, as in a foreign land, living in tents with Isaac and Jacob and heirs with him of that same promise. Abraham went. God said go. His trust pushed him to go. He went. He didn't know. He couldn't see the road. He didn't know where God was going to lead him. He didn't know all the things that he would encounter along the way. He really probably wasn't that familiar with all the land that he was going to walk through and live in and become a nomad at this point. We later learned that he was 75 years old, so he was well established where he lived. I know maybe some of you have been called by a company or a job or things like that to move, or maybe the military, from a home that you love and a home that you've been through for a long time to move somewhere across the country or across the state. And you just have to go. Abram got up and he went. I got a call a few months ago, actually. Someone had put me down as a reference for a job they were applying for. And asking all the questions, and we talked about character and work ethic and all these different things and how long you've known them. And, I was just trying to give them all the good things I could possibly say about this person. At the end of the conversation, the gentleman asked me, is there anything else you want to add? And I said, I'll tell you this, and this is the greatest compliment and the highest praise I can give someone. I said, I would trust him with my children. You got anybody in your life like that? That is trust. That is great trust. If I can hand my children over to you and know that they're going to be okay. That's the type of trust we see through Abraham here when he's called by God to go into a land that he's not familiar with. He's never been to. He doesn't know where he's going. And God says, I need you to step out and trust me. And Abraham went. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. The next statement there is, do not lean on your own understanding. Now, this really ties in with following and submitting fully to the will of God. Kind of what we talked about last week. We talked about how Jesus' purpose on this earth was to do God's will, and what sustained him was doing God's will, and his ultimate submission going to the cross was the will of God. And so we do that, and we follow God, and we do his will. Sometimes we want to understand, but sometimes we do it because we don't understand. We have to step out. Abraham didn't understand everything that was going to happen, all the places he was going to go, but he trusted God. And it says, do not lean on your own understanding. When I think about that word lean, it's about weight, right? Where you put your weight, how you lean, giving something weight. You think about a test, certain parts of the test may be weighted different than the others. The essay counts more than the multiple choice or the true and false, and so it has different weight. To give something weight, you can think about a trial where a good testimony gives weight to the argument that the lawyer is trying to make. So you think about that weight being credibility and worth. And so you're putting your weight into something when you lean into something. I saw a commercial the other day, and it was for a camper, pull behind, but it was made for ice fishing. You know, I've never been ice fishing. Yeah, I'd like to go, I think. What this camper did is it drove out on the ice, and once they got it set up, truck and everything, out here in the middle of a frozen lake. And so then the camper just lowered itself right over the tires, and it just became this dwelling. And then they go in and they pull the floor up, and there's the ice. So they drill down, they fish, they got a couch, they got a TV, they got a little kitchen over here, all in this camper sitting on the ice. You talk about weight distribution. How much are you thinking about weight? I'd be thinking about it every day. I don't know if I could sleep out there. They do it. They build houses out there, and I'm sure it's fine. We're talking about thick ice here, not the ice that we know about here in Georgia. But you think about leaning on that. You think about the weight. And the thing is you go out there knowing that ice is not going to break. But when we lean and put our weight on our own understanding and put value on our own understanding and our own plans, our own ideas, it's like putting your faith on thin ice. It's like putting your faith on ice where you don't know how thick it is and you don't know how much weight it will hold. Don't put your faith on thin ice. You go back to Abraham there, and we'll pick up still in Genesis chapter 12, down in verse 10. A couple examples here of when Abram, at the time, he decided to trust himself, distrust God. Maybe say, well, that's what God said to do, but there's a part of this I don't understand, so I may need to fill in the blanks. When he goes down to Egypt, there in Genesis 12, verse 10, there was a famine in the land, so Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe. He was about to enter Egypt, and he said to Sarai, his wife, I know that you are a woman beautiful in appearance, and when the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife. Then they will kill me. But they will let you live. So say you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, that my life will be spared for your sake. So he goes in and he's a little nervous. He's fearful, right? He's fearful that he is going to be in danger because of his wife, Sarah. And he comes up with this plan, and he decides, I'm just going to say you're my sister. And this selfish act of Abram implies that he thinks God was not able to protect him in Egypt. And sure enough, the Pharaoh takes Sarah into his house, tries to make her his wife. He finds out through God and some strife that God rains down on him that indeed Sarah is Abram's wife, and he hands her back and says, you guys need to get out of here. I don't know why you lied to me about this. The great part about that is when that plan backfired, the Lord rescued Abram, even when he lacked faith in God. But what did he do? He was leaning on his own understanding. He was playing this thing out. But when he played it all out, he did not put God into the picture. He did not add God to the story. Going forward a little bit in Genesis chapter 16, and this is really starts with Sarai and brings Abram into it. In verse 1, it says, now Sarai, Abram's wife, I'm going to start saying Sarah. I'm very sorry. That's so hard to say. Sarai had borne him no children. She had a female Egyptian servant named Hagar. And Sarah said to Abram, behold, now the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Go into my servant. It may be that I shall obtain children by her. It was customary at the time, if you could not have children, that you could provide a servant, and that child would be the child of the couple. All right, so this is not so far out of the ordinary. Abram listened to the voice of her. So now he is part of this. He is part of this. After he had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan, Sarah Abram's wife, took Hagar the Egyptian servant and gave her to Abram as husband and wife. And so she became a wife of Abram, but it certainly wasn't in the same status or category as Sarah was his wife. It's important. They did conceive a child. We know that child was Ishmael. We know that this is not the child of the promise. This is not the child that God intended for them. It's not the child that all the nations would be blessed through him. And so again, he took things into his own hands. He relied on and he leaned on his own understanding. A lot of friction, a lot of complications and problems arose from that. Hagar tries to leave, an angel sends her back. This child, he is going to be raised by Abram and Abraham, and eventually will have his own, nation almost with Isaac, kind of parallel with him, but again, certainly not the child of promise. But the point is, we see all the complications and all the things that happen when God is not consulted and when God is not included and when Abraham leaned on his own understanding. Instead of putting our weight on our own understanding, put our weight in the Word of God. Let's move forward here. And we'll look at verse 6, continuing in Proverbs chapter 3. A couple more lines there. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. In all your ways acknowledge him. So the call here is a comprehensive acknowledgement of God in every aspect of our life, in all your ways. That is to say, almost like you read in the New Testament, with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, with everything within your being, acknowledge God. Now, this acknowledgement, it comes from the word know, but it's not merely an agreement or an approval or an acceptance of things. It is a personal awareness that leads us to obedience of God, an awareness of God that leads us to obey God. We recognize him and accept him and confess him in all of our ways. We acknowledge God. Now, a lot of times we do acknowledge God in our life. We acknowledge him when things work out in our favor. And we said, yes, my idea that worked out well was God's plan. Therefore, praise God. Thank you, God, for that. We have that acknowledgement. Sometimes we acknowledge God in times of danger, times of distress. When we're uncertain, we go and start calling on God. But the key here and the mark of a real Christian, a true servant of God, is to acknowledge him in all circumstances. I think back again to last week's lesson talking about doing the will of God and saying your will be done is a lot harder when those things are bad, when things aren't working out as we had planned, when evil may befall our family or on us. And we say, still, God, your will be done, acknowledging God in those times. All of our ways acknowledge our God. Those ways, talking about everything we do and even how we do it, is an acknowledgement and a recognition of God, who God is in our lives. It's a comprehensive and all-consuming trust in God. Let's go back to Abraham in Genesis 14. Genesis 14, you read in the chapter that these kings are coming out to battle. And during some of those battles, Lot and all of his possessions and all of his people are captured. Abraham finds out about this, so Abraham gathers up some men and they go in and he takes back his family and what belongs to him. There's a blessing there from Melchizedek. And then picking up in Genesis 14, verse 21, the king of Sodom said to Abram, "Give me the persons, but take the goods for yourself." But Abram said to the king of Sodom, "I have lifted my hand to the Lord, God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, that I would not take a thread or a sandal or a strap of anything that is yours, lest you should say, I have made Abram rich." He is offered plunder. He is offered possessions. He's offered all these things when he's talking to this king. And he makes a statement, I have lifted my hand to God. He has made a promise to God that any blessing he receives, any wealth that he builds during this sojourn that is his life, would be from God, not from the king of Sodom, not from anyone else to say that I'm the one that made him rich, or come up with any other story about Abram outside his relationship with God. So after that battle, he denies all these things, and that rejection of that offer, it powerfully affirms that his dependence is on God, just like it has been since the day God called him and he stepped out of his homeland and he began that journey. If we're going to acknowledge God, and I guess we could work backwards on this to the previous verse. If we're not acknowledging God, then obviously we're leaning on our own understanding. We're putting our faith in ourselves, in our own abilities, our own things. And while Abram could have plundered these kings and taken anything he wanted, he realized that that's not where the blessing was going to come from. And we realize the same thing. It builds on if we're trusting God and we're following God and we're starting to lean on God for all these things, then we realize that we must also acknowledge him. Maybe it's something that's hard to do is to just acknowledge God in our life and just to say God's will be done, or just to say that was from God. It becomes part of our language. It becomes part of our thought process. And in everything we do, everything everywhere we go, everything we carry out, acknowledging God. And when we do that, we'll look at this last one here. He will make straight your paths. Make straight your paths. I think some of the versions, it may say direct your paths. I think about this over in Isaiah chapter 45, verse 13. It says, I've stirred him up in my righteousness, and he will make all his ways level. It's the same word there, the same idea, leveling out that path. Probably the greatest television theme song of all time is from the Dukes of Hazzard, and you remember exactly what it says. It says that they do what? They straighten the curves and they flatten the hills. That's right. Go back and listen to that today. If you're looking at me like, what? Do you not listen to it about once a week or so? Is that just me? So anyway, TV theme songs, Dukes of Hazzard, straightening the curves and flattening the hills. And that's the idea. Isaiah says that he's going to make his ways level. And here it talks about straightening the path and the direction we receive from that. A couple different Proverbs, that idea comes up in Proverbs 11, the righteousness of the blameless keep his ways straight. In Proverbs 15, folly is a joy to him who lacks sense, but a man of understanding walks straight ahead. And so life is a curvy road. Life is a bumpy road. It's going to be tough, but God will direct us, and direct us. He will remove the debris. He will open up the path. He will pave the way. You will find a way. You remember that example of being there, and honestly, when you can't see and you keep moving forward, the only thing that keeps you going is just the faith that the road is going to be there. And so if God is directing our path, we know the road is going to be there. Go back to Genesis, and we'll go to chapter 22. One more scene from the life of Abraham. Think about this, allowing God to direct our path. You're walking down a dark path, and imagine navigating that path with a candle. And now compare that when we turn it over to God, it's navigating the same path in broad daylight. That's the comparison. That's the comparison of my understanding, God's understanding. Trusting myself, trusting God, acknowledging self, and acknowledging God. In Genesis chapter 22, we pick up there. Pretty familiar story. We'll read a lot of it just for the goodness of the story. Genesis chapter 22, beginning of verse 1. After these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham, and he said, here I am. He said, take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, go to the land of Moriah, offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you. Verse 3 says, so Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took two of his young men with him, and his son Isaac. He cut the wood for the burnt offering, and arose and went to the place which God had told him. On the third day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place from afar, and Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey. I and the boy will go over there and worship and come again to you. Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering, laid it on Isaac his son. He took in his hand the fire and the knife, and they went both of them together. And Isaac said to his father, Abraham, my father, here I am, my son, Abraham says. He says, behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? Abraham said, God will provide for himself the lamb for the burnt offering. So they went, both of them together. When they came to the place which God had told him, Abraham built the altar there, laid the wood in order, and bound Isaac his son, laid him on the altar on top of the wood, and Abraham reached out his hand, took the knife to slaughter his son. But the angel of the Lord called from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. He said, Here I am. He said, Do not lay a hand on the boy. Do not do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. You know, that story really summarizes or is summarized in Proverbs 3, verses 5 and 6. Everything about it is there. You think about that, the trust that Abraham has put in God, the trust for him to say, and it changed over time, didn't it? Here God calls him and he says, I want you to go sacrifice Isaac. And he says, okay. He didn't try to come up with a ruse. He didn't try to come up with another plan. He didn't try to figure out everything. He leaned on God, not his understanding. What was his answer? Isaac said, well, where's the lamb? He said, God will provide. That's leaning not on your own understanding. He didn't know where the lamb was, but he knew God would provide. The fact that he calls him out, Abraham, and he says, Here I am, twice in that passage. That is implicit trust in God. God calls, we answer. And then you see how the story plays out there, and his acknowledgement of God to Isaac is that God will provide. He acknowledges that he doesn't know. It's going to be God's will. It's going to be God's plan that's going to be carried out, Isaac. And so just understand that we're acting on faith here. We're acting on trust in God. And so he takes him, and then God spares Isaac, obviously, and we see that a lamb is provided. And so what you see here, and especially this idea of making straight your paths, it's been going on the whole time. Ever since he called him out of his homeland, and he says, go, and it says Abraham went, he started on that straight path. Now, were there times that he kind of veered left or right? Of course, he's a man, he's not perfect. But when he followed that straight path, even though he did not know where God was going to lead him, that journey through life began a path that would lead to the Messiah, that would lead to Christ, and that would lead to that blessing that would bless all the nations through Abraham, just as he was promised. He journeyed through this life after leaving his home. He followed God. And when he could not see the road, he was convinced that God would continue to lead him and that God would fulfill his promise. Life's going to be unclear. Life's going to be dark. Life's going to be hard. But here we know that if we trust God fully, trust God with all of our heart, lean not on our understanding, in all of our ways acknowledge him, he will also make our paths straight. Even when we can't see the road, we can still see the one who is leading us. I want to offer you the opportunity this morning, if you're not a child of God, if you're not on that path, if you haven't put your trust fully in him, we offer you the opportunity to put Christ on in baptism, have your sins washed away, join the family of God, be a part of his church. Start on that path. Start on that path, putting all of your trust, all of your faith, all of your belief in God our Father. If we can help you with that this morning, we want to make that offer. Also, if there's something that this church can help you with, any need you have, we want to ask you to make that known as together we stand and sing.